What's going on, Sideboard podcast listeners? This is your host, Caleb Williamson, checking in for another episode. I'm joined today by the co-host, Timothy Clunt. What's going on, Tim?
How's it going?
It's going good, just chilling here at home, doing the normal thing here in Cali, which is stay home.
Yep, we are still in the no phase of everything.
Yep. So let's just get right into it today. So for our topics, we have a couple events that just happened. We want to go over those and just talk about some local events and some other events that happened on the East Coast. And then we had a section that we wanted to talk about today, which is just thinking about if our game had interactions that were similar to other games and what that would mean for us. So let's just get into our local events. Tim, I heard that you were able to go to a few events this past week/weekend. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to go, but how were those?
It was pretty good. Yeah, I went and played in one local event this weekend, and kind of a small turnout, but I mean, that's kind of to be expected in these times. But it was good. It was a good time.
That's good. What deck did you play?
I played Baby because I had a sideboard built for it, and I didn't really have a set sideboard for any other decks right now, and we were doing BO3.
Right, that's a good point. What were some of the decks there? I know people are playing Dark Broly. That's what I'm playing personally, but what are some of the other decks there?
Yeah, so I was on Baby, obviously, like I mentioned. There was a Dark Broly, a yellow Gotenks Apes, the new yellow skillless Gohan, a Lord Slug, and what was the last one? Oh, green Gotenks.
Okay. Slug's pretty spicy.
Yeah, I didn't have to play against it, which was probably a good thing because blue historically is not good against hand control.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, just kind of curious, what was your sideboard looking like? What were you preparing for,
So my sideboard is basically built for three types of matchups. One is the grindy blue mirrors. The other is like hyper aggro, go wide stuff like AOD and skillless and that kind of thing. And the other third of my sideboard is basically for like Dark Broly and Sin Shenron. It's like some Heavenly Wizards and a couple of other like one or two ofs in the sideboard just for those matchups.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Do you think that Heavenly Wizard is going to be the premier card against Dark Broly and Sin Shenron?
I think it's a really good choice. I know there's the one for red. I don't know if it's a TP or if it's just from the set. But I know it's restricted to either a red leader or just the Broly BR leader. And it literally, besides that, just has the same text as Heavenly Wizard does. I think
I got you.
Your only other option would be like Remote Serious Bomb, but you can't do that on defense, which is the issue.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So you ended up going 3-0, right?
Yeah, we had someone drop, so it kind of messed up the pairings in the last round, so the two undefeateds couldn't play against each other. So myself and the person on green Gotenks both went undefeated, and he ended up getting first just off of tiebreakers.
Okay, yeah, that's always unfortunate when you have two undefeateds and you're not able to play out the last round.
Yeah, so I played against the yellow Gotenks, and then Dark Broly, I played Dark Broly last. The second round, I played the yellow Gohan skillless deck.
Okay, yeah. That deck was pretty hyped up, but it isn't seeing much play at all. I think it's not great.
Yeah, I can confirm, at least from my end of that match, it was not favored for him from the beginning.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the events that happened this weekend. I don't have the exact like locations. I don't remember exactly where they were hosted, but some of the top decks I did get to see, and I think I sent you the lists for them. But we had a really high turnout of Gotenks, which is odd, pretty odd to me.
Sorry, you cut out for a bit.
Oh, I was just saying that we had a really high Gotenks showing
Oh,
this
yeah,
weekend.
I also saw that.
Which is kind of interesting to me because I haven't seen that many people playing it like locally.
Yeah, so this weekend was the first time I saw anyone locally playing it. I thought about playing it, but I really didn't want to have to dig through a bunch of my bulk for like the kind of generic green stuff.
Uh huh.
Um, so I didn't. But I'd been thinking about trying to go with like less heavy on the actual Gotenks line and just playing more of like your mid-range hand control style of deck, which I think is what Andrew Duvall's list was kind of more like.
Yeah, it was definitely a Gotenks engine in the hand control deck, pretty much. It's pretty similar to my teammate Andy's list for Gotenks, where you play Ribriands and Cells Kamehamehas and things like that.
Yeah, and he was
That
playing the Dark Broly unison also.
Yeah, I think Dark Broly is just the best or the second best unison for that deck, because you need, like, for a deck that has to have a unison, you need to get like 6 or 7 in the deck.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be like either a 4-2 split on the Vegito and Dark Broly or a 3-3 split, because it feels like you definitely need Vegito on turn 2 to awaken.
Yeah, that Vegito unison, because I've been on the opposite side of that during some of the testing I've done, is really nasty because he comes out on 2, he's a 15k, and then he's a +2 on his loyalty ability,
Yeah,
which is just
he starts
hard to
picking
kill.
up loyalty pretty quick.
Yeah, and then his -7 is honestly disgusting.
Yeah, I know in the semifinals that the ultimate on the Vegito unison is what won the game.
Yep. Yep. It's crazy. All right, so a couple other decks that we saw that honestly kind of surprised me were Invoker, which we've talked about a lot on the podcast here, but I hadn't been seeing it played quite often. Broly BR, and then the kind of sleeper is Vegex. I knew that Vegex was going to be good with the Bibbidi errata. I just didn't think it would be able to hold like enough of its own to do really well, but I guess with some of the new champ cards, it can still hold its own. But from those 3 decks, Tim, what do you think about that?
I'm really surprised Invoker showed up. Only one of them did well though.
Yeah,
Broly BR is a pretty strong deck even without the TPs, but with the TP, it's 100% like one of the top 3 decks in the game right now. And we kind of saw that with not the PPG event, but the event, I believe it was in Virginia. I might be wrong. And
it
then,
was Daylon Mack and Broly BR split in the finals, I believe.
yeah, Frank Miller and someone else split first
Oh,
and
okay,
second.
gotcha.
And then Vegex, I'm not really surprised that it's still having a showing. I know you've heard me talk about a lot how the leader does the majority of the work,
Hmm.
and like yeah, the hit to Bibbidi was a big hit, but the deck has so much power beyond just that one card,
Yeah,
and it was kind of
definitely.
funny because I was watching the PPG event today, Sunday, and I don't remember who it was that was commentating, but they were talking about some of the Vegex that were there at the event, and the ones that were more successful were not playing the actual Vegex chain, so like none of the 6 drops or 7 drops.
Yeah, I always contemplated playing Vegex just as a burst leader and not like trying to mill your stuff. And so like, running some overrealms or that sort of thing might be better, and just running value black cards. Cause like, honestly, like I bought Majin Buu attacks when they were $1 for a playset, and I think those cards are like insane. Those attack rares.
Yeah, even what's the worst one right now? The red one?
The red one is
And
the
even
worst
then,
one.
it's a basically 25k combo,
Yeah, for one card, which is decent.
which is insane. The black one has a lot of utility, which is why I like it so much. It's also just really good against Sin Shenron, because when you use your ball to go into the middle of your chain, the ball has to go to drop. So you can snipe the ball away and then remove the big guy, and they get no
Yeah.
value back.
Yeah, that, or you can also, because when you restart the chain, you have to have a 9-drop in hand to be able to go into it. So if you snipe the 9-drop from the drop, it means they can't, like if they go back into it, then that's one less 9-drop that they have for their ultimate.
Yeah.
I call it an ultimate. It's the 6-mana effect on the backside.
Yeah, so I feel like we're seeing people start to realize more utilities to some of the cards that I know you and I personally have seen and have been using cards for the utility that people are starting to see.
Yeah. And I think that like that concept comes from playing other card games, like I wouldn't be able to realize or sequence things as well if I didn't play Magic, right? Because learning the stack in Magic is a huge advantage if you understand how it works.
Yeah, it has made playing this game so much easier for me, having come from playing a lot of Magic and playing a lot of different formats of Magic, where in one format the stack is the most important thing, and in another format it's the battle area, and in another format it's the information you have versus your opponent has.
Yeah. So I just want to touch on Invoker a little bit again. I think that deck is potentially a legacy deck. Like it's going to be existing forever, essentially.
Yeah, I
What do you
can
think
see
about
that. I think probably that and Vegex are probably the 2 decks I would say right now that could fit into that category.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of how generically good Vegex is, and then Invoker there's really no wiggle room in the deck. But I don't really see it going anywhere because of how unique it is.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tailor your like couple of sort of flexible spots to whatever the meta at the time is.
Right. But yeah, it's interesting to see the like 2 decks that are a couple of formats old still kicking it.
Definitely.
So one thing we want to talk on real quick, guys, is our TCGPlayer affiliate link. If you guys have any needs or want to buy any of these decks, I know Gotenks cards like the Zarbon blocker that they run just got bought out. But if you want to get your set of stuff before there's no more online, make sure to use our TCG affiliate link in the description and throw us a couple of percentage from your purchase.
Yep. And then if you're looking to buy any sealed product, we recommend going through our sponsor, Madtown Gaming. You can check out their website, madtowntcg.com, or it'll be linked in the description. They've got plenty of different card games. Definitely check them out for any sealed product that you are looking for.
Absolutely. So a couple of the decks that did not show up at the event that I was actually in shock of were Baby, and then the Dark Broly deck, and then one other deck that I just remembered right now was Sin Shenron. They were all no-shows in Top Cut.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. I did hear though, because I was looking through the thread on the Virginia event. I guess Sin Shenron was third place, but it was like the only Sin Shenron that was there.
Yeah.
But still, that's a really low showing for what people were probably anticipating.
Yeah, I think Sin Shenron and Baby have the same sort of effect where neither of them are that fun to play for like your average player because they're not aggressive. And so it takes more of like a, seasoned player to play them. Not even because of skill. That's a whole nother topic, but even just because you have to find fun in playing defensive.
Yeah, it's definitely an acquired taste playing control, or I was kind of thinking while we've been talking about Baby, it honestly feels like a tempo deck, kind of. Because, like, yeah, you're countering a bunch of stuff, but you're getting bodies on board when you do it.
Yeah, I can totally get behind that because the one game that we've been able to play on Untap, it was like that where in like a tempo deck, if you board wipe them, it's a huge swing in your advantage, and it kind of felt that way. Whereas in a control deck, it would be more like you're not allowed to board wipe, or your board wipe can't hit my stuff.
Yeah. I was definitely surprised at the lack of Baby and Dark Broly, like you said. I thought that would have been a majority of the field, honestly.
Yeah, I think Dark Broly falls in this area where it's not the easiest deck to play. It actually is kind of difficult because you have to sequence your Brolys pretty specifically, and the deck doesn't like innately have a finisher, so you got to have something that's not just a 30k swinging every turn.
Yeah, I've noticed from playing against you and some of our other locals that have been testing Dark Broly, it heavily relies on sequencing, and honestly, it also has a lot of RNG to it with your front side effect on leader. Because if you only hit like 1 or 2 30Ks off of it, you're starting off in a really bad spot.
Yeah, I've been finding out more and more that if my opponent isn't pressuring me, I'm just not going to awaken right away because 1, I draw more on the back anyways, and 2, I want to fill my drop. Like my drop is essentially my hand, and I want to fill it with everything I can before I flip to the backside, because when you get to that backside, you're not milling anymore unless you play Majin Buu attack.
Yeah, and I do think that is a good tech addition for the deck as like maybe like a 2 of.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because one of the things in the Gotenks deck profiles I've been seeing is a lot of people are like, they fill their drop with certain cards. And if I was just thinking about how there's the Dark Broly that hits drop and hand, and then if you played Majin Buu attack, you could be like I don't know if Magic has a deck where they exile your graveyard, but like, the Gravekeeper deck type of thing where you're like, nope, your graveyard doesn't help you.
Yeah, it's basically just one card that is pretty much reserved to people's sideboards. It's called Rest in Peace. It just exiles all graveyards, period. So anything that was in there before and anything that would go in there after, as long as Rest in Peace is in play, they're just immediately exiled, which in this game would be the Warp.
Yeah, so, Dark Broly can kind of be that with some of these black cards, as well as its engine working in correlation, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how Dark Broly comes into the format, since it kind of didn't show up at the first weekend of events like we thought it would.
Yeah, I'm excited because, I've been playing it since the set came out, and so pretty excited to get to some tournaments and play.
Yeah, I definitely want to get some games in on it and not have to give you guys practice on the baby matchup anymore.
Yeah. That deck's not the most fun to play against.
I could see that. I mean, I still think it comes down to the pilot. Um, I think if you just give the deck to like your average Joe kind of player, uh, they might not know how to sequence their negates properly because it does really matter how you sequence them. Because you don't draw a whole lot unless you stick a Kefla, and up until that point, your hand is pretty small because you're using multiple negates every turn, and it's just kind of hard to come back from unless you either stick your Unison or, like I said, a Kefla.
Yeah. Um, I agree. It does take quite a lot of sequencing, and that's one of the things that Dragon Ball challenges of a player is how to properly sequence things, and the fact that there is no 100% correct way to sequence.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I did think of another deck I was kind of surprised did not make its way into top cuts at all, and that was Majin Vegeta. I've been seeing a lot of hype on that deck lately about how quickly it can kill, and I built it and I've been goldfishing hands quite a bit with it, and it does have the ability to kill turn 2, turn 3 relatively consistently. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of surprised that we didn't really see the deck in top cuts.
Yeah. I think part of that might be the fact that, everyone loves Gotenks. Um, it's a pretty easy deck to build because you just need 2 anniversary boxes and some SRs from this set, pretty much. Um,
Yeah, I feel like the SR Gotenks from this set isn't even like super necessary.
yeah, I think it's just your fifth and sixth copy, really.
I could get behind that.
Same with the Unison, you just need those extra copies, so make sure you see them. But yeah, the deck's super interesting, and I think it's the cheapest deck to build, aside from like Ribrians and all that. So that's probably why it's kind of, you know, the most popular. And it's honestly, it's really really good value. And Dragon Ball has kind of had this issue with hand control decks too, where when hand control is not balanced in a format, it means that the deck itself can have 13, 14 cards in hand, as well as keep your hand, close to, 5 or less each turn. And I think Gotenks might be getting in a spot like that. Last deck that was like that was like Cell. Probably wasn't 14, 13, 14 cards in hand, but, like 9, 10 or whatever. And so just, I think that deck might be something to watch out for. But we haven't seen half the format, like you said. Baby, Dark Broly, Shenron, Boo, Majin Buu. We haven't seen those decks. And so who knows how they play against Gotenks.
Yeah, I think moving forward with the tournament pack cards being allowed for tournaments and people getting their hands on them, I definitely think Broly BR is going to be one of the top 3 decks, like I said earlier. I think Vegex is probably going to slip into that top 3 also. And then the third, it might be Gotenks. If I had to pick a top 3 moving forward with the TPs, I think it would be those 3.
Yeah. It's interesting how the tournament promos can sway a format so easily, yet on some parts of the country they're so hard to get and so expensive,
Yeah, I saw all the posts of people selling them this weekend, and I was just like salivating like, man, I wish we had some of those locally.
Yeah, right. It's just, I think it's an issue,
Yeah,
but
definitely. Hopefully we get some from our shops locally pretty soon.
yeah, and it's kind of weird because, like, just touching on that real quick, is it has never been an issue of getting the promos. It has always just been an issue of getting them early. I don't know why, but a lot of shops get them super early and they start running events right away. but one of the things our shop does, or our shops, is when they get their events scheduled from Bandai, they have the promos for that day, and they don't have them for an earlier event because they don't get them until, that week or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. It's still kind of just a bummer that at least for us, we end up usually not getting them until they're not really relevant anymore.
Right, which is, kind of sucky, but
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so that kind of wraps up our recent events section, and so we want to go into a section where we talk about mechanics from other card games, probably Magic primarily, and just kind of talk about their effects that they would have on Dragon Ball. Just all hypotheticals here, but this is just kind of something me and Tim like to talk about and just, brainstorm a little bit. So, Tim, do you want to take us off with a mechanic?
Yeah. So I'm fully aware of how not okay it would be in this game, but the ability to float mana or energy would, oh my god, it'd be so good.
For those of you guys who don't know, what Tim means by floating mana is in Magic, you can do this thing where your energy doesn't go away until you go to another phase. And so you can tap your energy and then do an effect like, say, Senzu Bean to untap it, and then tap it again. And even though you didn't spend it all right away, you have all that mana or that energy in your what's called a mana pool. And so you can use the full sum of that as to play one card. So in this game, it would be like if you awaken during your main phase, untapped, or you tap 2, then you awaken, untap 2 during your main phase, then you tap 2 again, you'd have 4 mana, and you could play like an Obuni or something.
That would be, oh my god. I understand why it's not okay for this game, but it would be so good.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we've talked about cards, even just turn 2 Obuni, or, things like any untap leader, right? It would just be insane.
Yeah. It'd be kind of nuts.
But
another interesting one I just thought of right now, on the opposite end of that, because you have untap leaders and then you have draw leaders. What if we had a maximum hand size at the end of turn, like Magic does?
That would be interesting. What's the Magic one? 7?
It's 7, yeah, but you start with a 7-card hand. But
That'd
just
be
the idea of having your hand size capped at the end of your turn and having to discard down, I wonder if that would make certain decks a lot less greedy.
That would be interesting. Just talking about decks like, old Surge Piccolo before he got errated, or, Broly BR, the yellow one, where it's take a life, draw a card, and you get these gigantic hands. If you had to ditch down to 7, that would be interesting because you have to basically either play aggressively or discard,
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic. I'm not meaning to take all the ideas for this, but I know you mentioned one specifically for me because I complain about it all the time, or at least I used to. And it's the interaction with Remote Serious Bomb, and if your opponent's only battle card has barrier. I think
we call this the Edict effect.
It's so stupid that it doesn't kill that. So
yeah,
the way it works in Magic is barrier. The closest thing to the keyword in Magic would be hexproof. Hexproof only prevents your opponent from targeting the creature or battle card itself. It doesn't matter with like Remote Serious Bomb how it makes your opponent sacrifice it. That wouldn't matter in Magic, because your opponent is the one choosing the battle card to sacrifice. But that's not how it works in this game. And it frustrates me like no other whenever that topic gets brought up.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much the only card that actually makes your opponent choose a card. And so, it's the one thing that like people struggle with, especially coming from Magic backgrounds. And so if it did work the other way, similar to how Magic works, I think that card would be in everyone's 65, sideboard, just because of decks like Invoker, where
Yep.
they have a Vegeta in play, and you're just like, all right, cool, 1 mana, pop it.
Yep. I wish that it worked the way it did in Magic. I really,
Yep.
really do.
Yeah. It is kind of part of the game being unique, though. So, and barrier is not quite the same as like hexproof.
Bandai has made sure that it is not the same as hexproof, and that we all know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting whenever like a local person that's maybe more casual asks how barrier works with a card that kills like multiple cards, and the basis of it comes down to, does the card say choose on it? And if it does, then it doesn't get around barrier. It's interesting that something as simple as that can cause so many issues with different cards that are like, well, my opponent is choosing, or it's choosing all of their cards, or stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, I think this came up back around set 6, because I played Frieza Prison for a little bit, and one thing that really irritated me was paralysis technique when your opponent has a barrier card. Because it would hit everything except for that, and it just didn't make sense to me.
Right. Like if they wanted it to do that and barrier to get around it, why didn't they just say like
all of your opponent's cards? Then you're not choosing anything. Perfect.
Right. Or if they said like, if they wanted barrier to protect it from that card, just make that card say choose any number of your opponent's cards and -5 all of those.
Yeah. Could do that. Because
then it's like, targeted removal sort of. But yeah, the fact that we don't really have a dedicated sweeper or board wipe in this game, like we have a few things like the negative energy balls, which we've been talking about on the channel quite often, and then like other things, but most of the cards choose, and a lot of the cards that don't say choose, I feel like are just oversights of early cards in the game. And I think we need a dedicated sweeper card.
We need board wipes that it doesn't matter if there's barrier.
Doesn't matter if barrier, doesn't, also indestructible is kind of an interesting one.
I think, because right now it literally, you just minus it or negate its skills and then do something with it, and that's the only way, right?
Yeah, that's the only 2 ways.
I think indestructible should be exactly like the keyword in Magic, where you can still exile or warp it, but you cannot KO it or destroy it. So it wouldn't die from KO effects, it wouldn't die from battle. It'll only die from its power being put to 0 or from being warped.
Yeah, the thing that I really don't like with indestructible is that you can't even steal it with like a Ginyu 3-drop, the red one. Because that would be leaving the opponent's battle area. So you can't even steal it, and it's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that that's how that keyword should work at all.
Yeah. So, got any other, mechanics that would be kind of interesting in this game? I think going back to the mana floating one, or floating your mana, that would be kind of interesting on defense for like those counters that have a higher cost. If you were to, like, I don't know.
Yeah, so like maybe like some of the old 4-drop counters. If you were an untap leader, you could float your energy on defense, awaken, untap the 2, pay the extra 2 so you're at 4, and then use like a 3 or 4 mana counter.
Yeah, so like early game, you're not completely dead. Also, that would be kind of broken with like other decks too that just have good 4-drops, or they want to play like some 1-drops or something. It'd also make like Awakening essentially not matter when you did it, because if you float your mana, who cares, right?
Yeah. I do think it would be nice to be able to do that if Obuni was not a card. Because
Yeah,
then I
Obuni
think the
is
next best 4-drop would be
ridiculous.
like Draft Box 4 Piccolo. That would be like your ideal 4-drop to play on turn 2.
I think it would bring Foreseeing Hit back into the meta.
Or maybe even just, yeah, it could bring Foreseeing Hit back. Or even like just dumping 4 mana into a Unison on turn 2. Doesn't seem the
Yeah.
worst.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point too, because our Unisons, unlike Planeswalkers, are X cost, so they can have any number of counters on the entering.
Yep. So some of the leaders that let you awaken based on having a Unison, like Soul Striker, you could awaken turn 2. Unless he's a draw 2.
I think he's a draw,
Wait,
but
that
you
wouldn't
could.
work anyway. That wouldn't work anyways because you wouldn't have it in play. Never mind. Ignore that.
No, but you could swing. You could float 2, swing, untap 1, tap 1, pay 3 for it, and then awaken.
That's true.
You know, just to get those extra counters.
Yeah. It's interesting.
So what do you think about if they made a leader that allowed you to have more than one Unison? And it, because there's kind of an issue, right? One of the issues that I thought about initially with that is that your deck now has no combo power. But what if it was like Dark Broly, where you could,
you could
maybe on the
combo with
backside,
them.
yeah, discard a Unison, get 5k on your leader or something?
So you're telling me I can play Super Friends?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm in.
you know,
I'll
like
take
think
it to
about.
locals. It's probably not going to do well in a big event, but I'll play it at locals.
I think the ultimate you play in that deck is that new Unison ultimate, the Gogeta or whatever it
The
is.
Vegito.
Yeah, you
That
play quad killer.
I still think that you should be able to put any Unison underneath it to add a marker.
Because it's an ultimate, yeah, and the fact that it, like, I don't know why Bandai did this, but they put this text on a couple of Unisons where it says if you have 3 or less counters, you can't attack. I'm like, Bandai, why?
Yeah.
On the ultimate, like,
it's-
sure, it makes sense because it's a 25k, but on, like, the Dark Broly Unison, like, come on.
Yeah.
You know, if you
Kinda
want,
weird.
make it a 10k, I don't care. But at least let me swing.
Yeah. I don't know. There was some weird stuff that happened with this set for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was that new card that's kind of super controversial right now, which is the My card. I didn't put this in our notes, but I figured we should talk about it anyways.
I think it's terribly designed and it shouldn't have happened.
See, at first I thought the opposite, but the more I read the card, I think that if it strictly is for red and they don't print it for any other color, then it will be okay, because red outside of Broly BR, not super strong. Like, they have a lot of potential, they just don't do anything super unfair, and that card is really unfair. I think if they print it for every single color, then that card's broken.
I think just the mere presence of that card and it existing is going to pull red into the format.
Yeah, definitely, because it'll make decks like, you know, Vegeta Baby or Gogeta BR, or even I don't even know what other red decks are good, like Pilaf, I guess, be able to slap that down against blue, and then unless they have an immediate answer for it, they're just taking a bunch of damage that turn.
I'm pretty sure there's like 2 answers that blue has, but blue has to be going first and have it in their opening hand. And it's Desperate Measures or the Bulma for the baby deck. That's it. Outside of that, blue cannot touch that card at all.
There is one other card that doesn't like solve the issue, but it does help against it, and that's the Final Hope Slash, because it does ignore barrier and bounce it to hand.
That
For free,
just
if you
puts
have a
a
Unison.
band-aid on it for a turn.
Yeah, but like if it's, they like if they summon their big boss and then they play that and then they swing and then you just pay one, or you even just play it for free, bounce it back to their hand, then you're cool for the turn, right? But yeah, it is a band-aid.
Yeah, I don't think answers should be band-aids, which I guess is what they did with this card. Is definitely not a band-aid, but they also printed very specific hate to a specific deck when the deck hasn't even had a showing, which is I don't agree with.
Yeah, I think the pinnacle of this card's design flaw is going to be when you get Invoker starting to play it, and Invoker can play it in an Invoker mirror match. And so, that's just going to make the game take longer, and game one will be the only game. It'll be a best of one.
Yeah, there's just way too much on that card for it just being 1 mana. Having barrier, popping an energy and a life, that's way too much.
And you draw a card when you play it.
Yeah, and you draw a card when you play it. That's way too much. That is literally the best 1-drop in the game.
Against blue.
Well, yeah, but like there's always blue decks being played. But
Yeah,
it does also specifically hate Baby out of the format once that draft box comes out.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's kind of like the Cronoa effect, right? Like if you're playing this deck or this card in your deck, you auto lose. But if you don't play against the red card or the red deck, then you should be fine. So
yeah, because I think I counted earlier because we were talking about it in our group chat, and like it hits like at least half of the Baby deck, even without the TPs, because you've got both of your 2-drop negates, the Mechiorp and the Baby. You've got D-Magic. You have the counterplay Baby that untaps, and like a couple other things. And it ends up being like half the deck that basically their power is cut in half.
Right. I do want to say though, when we were playing our game, even though it was kind of close, it did feel like super unfair, just the efficiency that the untap had. And I think that's why Gotenks is kind of in the meta, because while it is energy efficient, it's not hand efficient. So you have a hard time with like hand size.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said earlier, until you land a Kefla, your hand is not very big.
Yeah. Yep.
And like you kind of need the untap negate guys early so that you have enough battle cards in place so that on turn 3 you can slam the Kefla and then draw your 2 cards, and then you have 2 energy up for defense.
Yeah, it does. I don't know. It's kind of weird because like it's not the most game breaking auto, and it is once per turn. So like if they save it for their kill turn, you can just eat the life and eat the energy, and like you'll probably be all right. But if they play it turn 1 and you don't have an answer, then that's very, very bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like maybe a better way to design the card would have been to say, if your opponent has 4 or more life and 4 or more energy, then these effects happen when they untap. Or like maybe one of the two things, because both of them is kind of redundant.
It's overkill.
Yeah, so if they have, 4 or more energy, then it does both effects.
I could see that. I definitely don't think you should be able to just burn your opponent when they're at 1 life just for them having a negate.
True. Well, I mean, at that point, they'll just not untap if they need to negate.
Sometimes you really need to, though.
Yeah.
Like with blue, and I'm at 1 life. If I have 1 energy open and a D magic, I need that second energy off of it.
True. I think maybe cards like Final Hope Slash are just going to start needing to be played in blue.
Yeah, probably. It's just going to feel really bad.
Yeah, it feels bad. But I mean, the card isn't terrible. this
It's
new
just
card,
not good.
the my card probably shouldn't have had barrier. Like
Definitely
Borgos
not.
and the Cunning Chain, none of them have barrier. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting what it does, and I'm sure they'll give Blue an answer to it in draft box, because they're not dumb. They're not making cards for no reason, right? Like just stupidly good cards for no
Just
reason.
let me have a force of will.
You do. It's the baby secret.
No, that costs 5. Oh, no, that one's just a negate. I can't counterplay with that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Let me answer the my for 0 energy. Make me discard 2 cards. I don't care. That would actually probably be worth it.
But then what if they just play another one because they can play 4?
Then they got you. I don't know.
So if they see 2, then you're just done. But if they see 1, you're fine.
I guess, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it is in Magic, though. When you're playing decks with Force of Will, and you have to counter a combo piece, you just kind of hope they don't have another one. And sometimes, if they do, you weren't going to win anyways.
That's a fair point. I mean, this card is kind of one of those things where it feels like a... what's that card? Grand Abolisher from Magic, where it's 2 mana. Well, it's 2 mana, not 1, and obviously it does different effects. But it essentially says during my turn, you can't. You need to sit there and watch me play.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it feels like.
That's exactly what it feels like.
It's if your opponent is on red and if you are on blue, and specifically like one blue deck. Because like a lot of the other ones,
if you're specifically playing baby, that is the only card in the game you do not want to see.
Yeah. So all in all, I think the card is fine just because of its like it shuts off D-Magic, which was kind of needed for the other blue decks that are a little bit more efficient, like Soul Striker and SS3. But against baby, it really hurts them. And it's just one of those effects when Bandai prints a quote-unquote silver bullet card, it hits like part of a top-tier deck, but it also like demolishes a low-tier deck, just like how Tau did against every hand control deck in existence.
Yeah, Tau made hand control like almost completely unplayable.
Yeah, I totally agree. So they're on thin ice with this card, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see with the rest of the spoilers if there's a whole cycle, which I hope not, because that would be a disaster.
If there's a whole cycle, we just request immediate ban. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, I would get behind that. I don't even think the my should be there, but a whole cycle is not good for the game.
Yeah, nope. Anyways, so that wraps up kind of what we wanted to talk about for today. Any final thoughts about those things, Tim?
I'm kind of excited to see the rest of the draft box stuff. Hopefully there's enough that entices me to pick some up. Because right now, soon. It does feel really soon. It's like, what, next month?
Yeah, it's sometime next month.
It's so fast. Everything's coming so fast.
I haven't even played in a tournament with my set 11 cards.
I know, and I've played in like 5.
That's fair.
That's crazy.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it on that. Before we wrap up, just want to mention we do have our merch store available. It'll be linked in the description. We've got a couple different styles of t-shirts, and we've got sweatshirts there. And we're going to be working on some new artwork and designs for some shirts coming up in the future, especially for the holiday season. So pick up some of the originals. They may not be there forever, so get them while you can.
Yep. And if you see Tim in an event, he'll sign your shirt for you.
100% I will do that.
Yep. You just have to provide the Sharpie.
I might even just buy a Sharpie and carry it around. I don't know. We'll see.
Yep. So anyways, guys, check out the merch store. keep an eye out. We're actually going to be looking, for, like Tim said, for some new artwork for shirts and stuff. So you guys have any ideas, feel free to message us, either, Caleb Williamson or Timothy Clunt on Facebook, or you can message the podcast directly on Facebook for any, fan art or whatever.
Or if any of you guys are artists and you would like to submit some ideas for logos or just artwork in general that incorporates Dragon Ball and like the podcast kind of together, anything like that, feel free to post it on the Facebook page or, message one of us like Caleb said. Definitely would be nice to see some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so that wraps up the episode for today, guys. Just remember TCGPlayer affiliate link, merch store, and share
our sponsor for sealed product.
Yep, and then always share your favorite podcast with all your friends and get them to play the game.
Definitely.
Alrighty, guys, this is the Sideboard Podcast. Checking out.
See ya.